In 2024, we've seen some excellent affordable keyboards come out of the niche of enthusiast or custom keyboards. That is to say, keyboards made with higher-end materials that are aimed at customers who like to tinker with sound, feel, and appearance. Two such keyboards in a TKL layout are the Evoworks Evo80 and the Wobkey Crush80. These are both priced under $200 and feature aluminum construction, ball catch assembly, magnetic PCB connectors, and different typing feel options. Let's put these two head to head and see which one might be the better choice for you. Before we dive in, I want to mention that the Evo80 here was originally sent to me as a review unit, which I did do a separate review for, and I will link to that video in the description. The Crush80 I bought myself, and I will include a couple of affiliate links for each keyboard here in the description in case you'd like to pick up either one and you'd like to support this channel. In 2024 so far, we've seen some fantastic values in custom keyboards, including fully assembled and kit options, one of which was the Wobkey Rainy 75 earlier this year. But I think that these two keyboards are kind of a sweet spot. They both have a price of $169 before shipping, of course. Actually, the Crush80 also has a light option for a lower price, but the Pro model is $169, and at this price, you're getting excellent build quality from both, like quality that would have easily cost over $200 in previous years. All right, so we're not gonna do the usual rundown of every feature and spec here because we're gonna cover pretty much everything that we need to in the comparison discussion. So let's just start off with a quick sound test of each one fully stock first, then we'll get into that comparison. All right, let us begin our comparison talking about build quality and physical differences. Both the Evo80 and the Crush80 are made from 6063 CNC machined aluminum. The coating on the cases does vary slightly. Both of them have some color options that are an anodized finish. With the Evo80, some are anodized and some are spray coated. And then with the Crush80, some are anodized and the remaining are electrophoresis coated. The total weight is also slightly different between them, with the Crush80 weighing more at 2,380 grams. That's the Pro model. And then the Evo80 has a total weight of 1,870 grams. Now, in terms of physical dimension differences, they are very close to each other. The Crush80 has a very, very slightly taller front height, not very much, but when you measure it in millimeters, there is a slight difference there, and also the typing angle is also ever so slightly steeper with the Crush80 as well compared to the Evo80, but in terms of the physical, size and all of that, they are very similar. They do have some physical differences in appearance, though. Of course, you'll notice that the corners of the case are slightly more rounded with the Evo80, whereas, they're not sharp or anything on the Crush80, but the rounding is a tighter angle for the Crush80. And then from the side profile, you have a couple of design differences there. And then, of course, on the bottom, you have differences in the design of the weight and just the layout of the bottom of the case. Those aspects are all very subjective, though. It's just a matter of which look you prefer more. They both have the exact same layout here, with both of them having an F13 key instead of a rotary encoder knob or anything like that. There's no other extra buttons, dials, rollers. They both have a pretty typical TKL layout. Now, in terms of connectivity, they both do have the same set of connections. They both have a wired connection, USB-C, a 2.4 gigahertz connection, and they both also have 3 Bluetooth connections, which you switch between using key commands. Now, interestingly, the Crush80 specs don't provide a polling rate for those connections, but they do state that when you put it into its low latency mode, the wired connection has a latency of 2 milliseconds and the 2.4 gigahertz mode is 3 milliseconds, which is actually quite low latency, perfectly good for gaming use. Meanwhile, the Evo80 does provide the polling rates, which are 1000 Hz for both wired and 2.4 GHz connections and 125 Hz for Bluetooth. One little difference from a design standpoint that has to do with the connections is that the Crush80 does have a storage compartment under the keyboard in the weight for the 2.4 GHz receiver. The Evo80 does not have physical storage for the receiver. When it comes to customization, both of them are VIA compatible, so you've got the same mode of customization, which means, Windows, Mac, Linux, macro usage, so you got a similar experience there for both. Let's talk about battery capacity, because there is a difference here. The Crush80 has a total of 7,500 milliamp hour, while the Evo80 has a total of 8,000 milliamp hour. They both have 2 battery cells in them in the bottom of the case, so you're gonna get pretty darn good battery life. As far as the firmware on keyboards that are VIA compatible, I'm actually not sure if the firmware is full QMK or not, because having full QMK firmware versus just being VIA compatible, those are not the same thing. But in general, keyboards like this, it's not like ZMK firmware where you can get over 1,000 hours of use out of a very small battery cell. I would expect them both to go over a month of use if you're using it for about 8 hours a day and then letting it kind of go to sleep at night. Really, they both should perform well, but the Evo80 does have just a little bit more battery capacity overall. And of course, the battery life will depend on the backlighting, whether you're using it at all or whether, what brightness level it's on. So a lot of variability in there. Speaking of backlight, let's talk about that. They both have south-facing RGB. Now, the Crush80 only has the RGB on the Pro model. The Lite model does not have full per-key RGB lighting. They both also have an accent light under the nav cluster. There is a difference in design here, though. You've got sort of that like heartbeat style design with the Crush80, which does have effects. It's not just one solid color that you can control. It's also got side lighting underneath the sort of the rim or the edge of the case here, which shine down on the desk. I personally turned those off. They don't really shine out from the side very much. They're kind of like a straight down RGB light. Obviously, that's up to personal taste as to whether you like that or not, but that's an extra light the Crush80 has that the Evo80 does not have. And the accent lighting for the Evo80 has this little kind of mirror-plated accent strip around it, which some people may or may not like. I didn't personally find it distracting, but they both have that accent light on the top of the case, which can be turned off. Now let's talk about internals, because we do have several differences here when it comes to the internals, as well as the different configurations that you can buy. When it comes to the Crush80, remember we have 2 versions. We have the Crush80 Lite, and then we have the Crush80 Pro. The Lite version comes with a polypropylene plate, which is a soft, flexible plate, and HMX frost switches. Now the Pro version comes with an FR4 plate that does have flex cuts, so it's still a little bit flexible, but is a firmer plate, and that comes with Kale Cocoa switches, and it has a silicone bean gasket mount. Now, these silicone beans that are in here are not particularly soft, so you do get some flex with the Crush80, but it's not like this super squishy. It's not like a foam gasket mount. A little more of an absorbed, firm feel to it. Now, the Evo80 also has 2 models available. They both are identical in terms of functionality, but one option comes with an FR4 plate and Azure switches, and the other comes with a polypropylene plate with oat switches, and the mounting here is a leaf spring mount. It's a butterfly style leaf spring mount. So you've definitely got a difference here in terms of feel. Now, both of these don't offer tons of flex or up and down movement with all of the stock foams included, because they both come with several layers of foam that you can easily remove because they both have a ball catch assembly. So that basically means all you have to do is push down on a couple of keys and pull up, and the top of the case will come off on both of them very, very easily. So because of that easy disassembly, they both are great for anybody who definitely, likes to open up their keyboard and do a little bit of customizing. And then they both also have a magnetic PCB connector, so there are no cables or wires to disconnect. You just simply place it back down. Now you're reconnected and your keyboard works fine. I didn't have any connectivity issues with either of these, so it seems like that's a pretty stable connection as well. Now, one other significant difference here between these has to do with the PCB. The Evo80 PCB does not have support for screw-in stabilizers or PCB-mounted stabilizers for the stabilized keys, and it also does not have support for a split spacebar, whereas the Crush80 does have both. You've actually got the cutouts for screw-in stabilizers here for your stabilized keys, and you also have the ability to use a split spacebar. You've got 2 switch connections here on either side, in addition to the one in the center, and then you've got additional spaces for screw-in stabilizers here so that you can actually do a split spacebar if you wanted to. And while we're on the subject of PCB differences, they both do have flex cuts. However, another little difference here is that the PCB of the Crush80 supports an ISO layout right out of the box in its stock format. You've got the proper arrangements here of sockets so that you can do an ISO layout, whereas the PCB of the Evo80, I believe, has the proper sockets here for an ISO enter key, but I am not certain that this is actually compatible with an ISO layout the way this currently is. I did find an ISO version of the Evo80 on Monaco Keys online store, so it seems like if there is a separate version here, that would lead me to believe this is not fully ISO compatible. By the way, one other thing I didn't say about the stabilizers, but you may have actually seen it on the overhead camera, they both come with plate mounted stabilizers, and they're both fine in my opinion. Both of them, I don't have any excessive rattle or any issue really or wobble with the stock stabilizers, so they're pretty equal in terms of the stabilizers they come with. The difference though was that only the Crush80 supports PCB mounted stabilizers, the Evo80 does not. All right, let's talk keycaps for a second here. They both come with a full set of color matched keycaps for the case theme that you choose, and there is a slight difference between them. So with the Evo80, the set that I have with this purple case color, these are die sub PBT in a cherry profile, and the Crush80 version that I have here is also PBT in a cherry profile, but these are double shot. They're both good quality. I wouldn't say that either one is up to the quality of, say, PBT fans keycaps, but neither one has anything really significant to complain about. The only thing when you compare the two, if you look at some of these side by side, you will see the difference between a little bit of softness on the die sub legends of the Evo80 compared to the double shot legends on the Crush80. So if you're really looking for differences, you will see a little bit of that. Again, this wouldn't be a deal breaker for me for the Evo80. Now, when it comes to sound and feel, I've already been talking about the feel a little bit as I talked about the internals, so let's kind of focus on the sound. There are a lot of variables here. First of all, each one has those different models available that come with different plate materials and different switches, so that what you choose is going to greatly affect the outcome in terms of the sound that you get. But in terms of these two, as they come stock, here are a couple thoughts. First, with the Crush80 Pro that comes with the Kale Cocoa switches. The feel of the switches I don't really have complaints about. They are smooth feeling, they don't feel scratchy to me. They have a light but snappy feel to them. However, the sound is where there's a downside here. My set is very pingy. Several of them are emitting quite a lot of spring ping, even just while I'm daily typing. I'm not even like really mashing the keys, and I'm hearing the spring ping while I'm typing, which is not a sound I want from my keyboard. So I'm a little disappointed in the switches themselves. I would swap them out personally just because I don't love that sound and I don't really feel like hand lubing all of them to try and get rid of it. So here's what the Crush80 sounds like with a different set of switches. I'll put on the screen which set I actually use. As for the Evo80 with the Azure switches and FR4 plate, I think the sound out of the box is actually a little more creamy than the Crush80 Pro, which is funny because this is actually supposed to be the clacky option. So the polypropylene plate with the oat switches might even be more of a creamy sound. It definitely does have some pop to it, and it also has a little bit more of a hollow sound from the spacebar, especially compared to the Crush80, even when all of the foam is in there. So that's one little downside of the sound between the Evo80 and the Crush80. However, aside from that little bit of hollowness with the spacebar, there are no negative sounds here. None of the Azure switches had spring ping. The case doesn't have any bad resonance other than just that little spacebar issue. But otherwise, no sound complaints about the Evo80. It really just comes down to personal taste and which model you pick. One other sort of miscellaneous thing I want to point out here is that in terms of the plate materials, because you basically have to pick one when you buy it, you pick a version and you get the plate you get because these are pre-assembled. With the Evo80, you can get the other plate material if you don't like the one that you got. Maybe you want the oat switches, but you also want the FR4 plate because you don't like the polypropylene plate. You can buy the FR4 plate separately and swap it out. With the Crush80, I did not see an option on Wobkey's site indicating that these plates are available separately. However, I did find at least one site where they're offering different plate materials for this keyboard. It seems to me like they're third party produced though, so they're not actually from Wobkey, which is fine as long as they work. I don't personally have experience with them though, so I'll drop a link in the description to where I saw those plates that are available for the Crush80, but there's no guarantee that they are exactly perfect if they're not, coming from Wobkey. So overall, who is the winner in this head-to-head comparison? Well, I have to say I think the winner is you, because these are both excellent choices when it comes to a pre-built, easily customizable, very high quality TKL keyboard. To me, these are tied in several categories, including the quality of the build. I don't think one has an obvious advantage over the other in terms of quality of the materials, the machining, or just the overall execution. When we look at specific categories, there are some things that might make one the better choice than the other for you. For example, the Crush80 has a better layout compatibility right out of the box. You've got the ability to do a split spacebar if you want to. You can do screw-in stabilizers if you want to. You can do an ISO layout if you want to. The Evo80 does not do screw-in stabilizers, doesn't do a split spacebar, but there's also an ISO version of it available, so I don't believe the compatibility is quite the same as the Crush80 there. So should you buy one of these over an option like the Keychron Q3 Max? Well, the short answer is, in my opinion, yes. However, there are a couple of caveats there. Now, if you know you definitely need an encoder knob, if that's something you just must have, the Q3 Max has it, and these don't, so that's an advantage to the Q3 Max. A second advantage over the Evo80 is the ability to use screw-in stabilizers on the Q3 Max, so there are a couple of reasons why you might still prefer the Q3 Max. However, it is more expensive than both of these, not to mention these stock plate-mounted stabilizers are better than any set of Keychron screw-in stabilizers I have ever had. But in terms of which one of these is overall better, it really just comes down to your priorities and which things are sort of on the top of your priority list. It could easily be either one, and you wouldn't be going wrong with either of these keyboards. They're both excellent options. All right, so I hope that comparison was helpful or at least interesting for you. Let me know what you think of these two keyboards in the comments. Let me know if you picked up one or both and what you think of how they compare and how you're liking the choice that you went with. Don't forget to subscribe to the Semi-Pro Tech and Gear channel, and while you're here, check out one of these videos. I know you'll enjoy it. Thanks, everybody. See you next time.